Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted this morning to be talking with comics creator and teacher. I did not realize you were a teacher as well, but glad to hear about that. Mayday Trippe. Mayday, welcome
Hey,
to the podcast. Hey, now
hey, thanks for having me.
oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. You are currently in a space where you're also doing some art as we're talking, which I think is super cool.
Well, you know how these days students are often allowed fidgets,
Hmm.
Um, I've been thinking about it since I got into teaching again, is that I basically had developed drawing as a fidget as a kid because it's quiet and you're not
Hmm.
really bothering anybody. But when I was a kid, you would encounter those teachers that are like, you're supposed to be paying attention. I'm like, this is me paying attention.
Right.
You know, if
Yeah.
I'm not drawing, my brain kind of wanders out the window. So I tend to just lean into it these days. Like
Yeah.
it's going to be easier for me to understand what's going on if I just am drawing. I'm working on I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but
Oh,
Secret Wars
yeah.
#9,
Yes,
or
yeah.
actually #8, when Spider-Man gets the black suit.
Hmm.
I'm doing the Amalgam Comics version of that, where Spider-Boy gets the black t-shirt, that's a symbiote.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is so cool. And yeah, I'd love to see the process. You said that you posted a process video yesterday on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I've been told that I should probably jump out there, but I don't know. I try to limit my social media to one or two at most times, but glad to see part
Yeah,
of the process as well.
I don't I don't like spending a lot of time on there, so I don't remember to check it, but like once every week or so,
Yeah.
and see what, funny things people have sent me or interesting things people have sent me. But people aren't joking about the algorithm on that app being
Hmm.
like it'll just define your personality in ways you do not expect, and it'll tell you who you are.
Yep. Yeah. And I resist that. I resist that.
Yes.
I try to
Yeah.
find the positive things. Basically, right now, social media is kind of like an art book to me. I just go on to look at art, and if it's something heated, then I tend to stay away from it. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
So, what was it about comics? Like, was this something, a journey that started for you at a young age?
Yeah. For me, I kind of uh reference it in my book, Something Terrible, but the
Hmm.
thing that got me into comics, like I was reading newspaper comics and drawing. I liked the Ninja Turtles in third grade. That got me started drawing. But the Batman 1989 movie
Oh yeah.
had
Yep.
come out on VHS, and in fifth grade, for the last week of school, my teacher let us watch several movies, and one of them was the Batman '89 movie. And up until that point, like I liked Batman as much as any other kid. I
Hmm.
liked Super Friends, and but this was like pre the animated series and stuff. So
Hmm.
this was the first time I'd ever seen Batman's origin and why he is what he is and why he does what he does. And it was a real game changer for me, having survived like various like traumatic experiences, and having to go to school with all these kids that it seemed like everything was just normal. I'm sure it wasn't,
Yeah.
but that was the facade everybody was putting on. And here's this guy who survives this horrible thing as a kid, and then he uses it to fuel becoming someone who helps others. And I just loved it. I loved the
Mhm.
whole idea. And so I picked up a Batman comic at Walmart, of all places, uh, that week, and got heavy into comics. Like, a lot of people are partisan as far as Marvel DC.
Mhm.
I quickly was reading both, and just it was a great time in the like early 90s. A lot of people talk about the 90s as this horrible time for comics, and I understand the reasons of like the speculator bubble and stuff, but just as like a teenager, and preteen, like finding like Superman died. What are you talking about? And then there's
Yeah.
this new guy who's Batman. Like all the uh hooks and tropes that we now recognize as like gimmicks to get people into comics. Well, they really worked on me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was reading the Clone Saga and Age of Apocalypse and everything. I loved it all.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I came to comics about the same time then, and that 1989 movie was huge for me
Oh yeah.
too. And I'm with you as well. I wasn't a Marvel or DC person. It was comic books. It was, Image Malibu, Now
Mhm.
Comics, whatever I could find, whatever I could get my hands on. And there is something powerful about those stories of like overcoming trauma. And that's
Mhm.
something that I connect with in the Batman story as well. Not that you would necessarily in real life dress in a rubber bat costume, but you might.
Well, I
I
have.
don't know.
I mean, I have,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
usually for Halloween. So
Same. Yeah.
yeah.
I've been known to dress as characters too. But yeah, a powerful story, and it sounds like so superheroes were part of the the thing that captured you early on, and I appreciate the
Hmm.
range of what you do. So from something terrible to like Power Lunch, and so it sounds like superheroes continue to be this thing that you visit in your work.
Yeah, I if you were to ask me like what's your deal, just as a person, the number one thing I would say about me is that I like superheroes. It's the
Hmm.
easiest thing, like a characteristic, like that you could explain. I like
Yeah,
other stuff. I like sci-fi and fantasy and video games, but like um I don't know. It's so funny to me because superheroes get a lot of like really recurrent criticisms,
yeah,
like their male power fantasies and their adolescent and all these things. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. But when you talk about it being like an adolescent power fantasy, it's a power fantasy of using your power responsibly to
hmm,
benefit others. You know what I mean? I think of things like James Bond or the Fast and Furious, which I also enjoy, but
yeah,
those are more like power fantasies from like the pure, like, this is awesome, I'm being cool. Whereas Superman's like contemplative and like deciding how to benefit people, It's just
yeah.
a different mindset that I don't know, it's sort of religious for me, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, characters like Superman, I mean, Superman has the outsider dynamic, sort of
Hmm.
the person who's alone surrounded by numerous other people. Batman has that too. There's a poignancy, and I also love James Bond.
Yeah.
But there's just not that aspect. It's more about like as you mentioned the tropes for me with James
Hmm.
Bond.
Yeah, in fact, my current favorite Bond movie is the one where they make him more like Batman in Skyfall, where they give you
Oh yeah.
the the whole origin. They just basically make him Batman. I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. That makes me like James Bond more.
Yeah, same. Um, so I think so the official question that I have woven in there is, what is it about comics that allow you to kind of create, to tell the stories that you want to tell?
Um, the greatest thing about comics, in my mind, is that you don't need anyone's approval to do them. You don't need a budget to do them. You know, I was a middle school kid with do you remember they used to make this green and white striped printer paper? It was like long and there would be these big wide green and white stripes that would go through like dot matrix printers.
I
Um,
think so. That's somewhere in my head. Yeah, I think so.
it's very specific, but my dad worked at Honeywell and he was able to bring home like big reams of this paper that whenever they were getting rid of some and um, I would draw on it. It was big, huge paper. It had these green and white stripes. It was, but the other side was white and Um, I drew my first comics on those papers just for me and my friends in middle school, and there's just no limits. You could do whatever you wanted to do,
Hmm.
um, and you didn't need like cameras or equipment, the way you would for film. You didn't need actors. It was just, this skill that I had or was had a burgeoning talent for, which was drawing. And I don't know. So you could just do whatever you wanted to do. And telling stories
Yeah.
about people helping each other just seemed, I don't know, very meaningful to me. And I
Yeah.
like I like how superheroes, not this isn't comic specific, this is another genre thing, but I like how they put what they're about on their chest
Mm-hmm.
and just go out into the world. Like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm not getting paid for it. I'm just here to do good. And
Yeah.
that may have set me up poorly for surviving here in late stage capitalism, but it did provide me with like a really source of, I don't know, identity and strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it was Scott Fogg who came on and was talking about um, the first experience that he had at Heroes Con and how I think the two of you had kind of like carpooled or something. So
Uh-huh.
that was just a brief glimpse into sort of the way that you reach out, collaborate with others, involve people in what you're doing. So any particular collaborations, any creators out there that you want to spotlight that you've worked with or not worked with necessarily?
Um, yeah, I end up working with people I'm friends with a
Hmm.
lot because the kind of people that I like to be friends with tend to, I don't know, have this same sort of mindset. Scott's a good example of somebody who's very influenced from like a doing good moral framework of characters like Superman.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Scott and I have been friends a really long time now, and uh, I love the guy. But working with him or my other really good friend Jason Horn, who
Hmm.
we worked together on. We used to do coloring gigs for Oni together a lot, and we lived near each other in Nashville. And then when I got asked to participate, there was a Tori Amos comics anthology years ago,
Yes, yeah.
and uh, I was I hadn't really written at the time too many comics, and so I was asking friends like if they would want to like write and then I would draw. Like I was asking friends like I think I asked Ed Brisson, who's now like a big Marvel guy, but he's always been a friend of mine. So I was like, hey, do you want to do a thing with Tori Amos? And he's like, I don't know really much about her work. And I'm like, okay. So I asked Jason, and he's like, I own this many CDs, this many are Tori Amos. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you're the right
Wow, wow.
person for this. And then we worked together on that. And it was really fun because we got to meet her and he's a huge fan. And I always liked her stuff too, but we got to go to Comic Con and um, it's just fun when you work with other people who, I don't know, love comics as much as you do.
Hmm.
Even, I don't know, because outside of our little world, it's I mean, especially when I was growing up, it seemed like people really looked down on comics. That's really turned around a lot in the last like decade and a half. But with the rise of like Raina's comics and
Hmm.
the kids comics like entire like genre, and then the superhero movies becoming dominant. Like I was Captain America for Halloween in 10th grade,
Yeah.
and nobody knew who I was.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's really changed a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
But I
remember a
still
time.
have that mindset where when you meet someone else who loves this stuff, it's like, oh, we got to work together.
That's cool. Yeah. I remember a time when like I wear shirts like this now with the Captain America
Yeah.
symbol on it, and I'm like, there was a time you wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable doing
Oh
that,
yeah.
but yeah, it's
I've
cool
got
now.
my Cap Shield earrings in today.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, that literally when I was capped for Halloween that time, the only person who knew who I was the principal who didn't like me, but he started singing the 60s cartoon show theme song when Captain America throws his mighty shield.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, yes, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely so. Um, so I was going to ask you about project redesign and then any titles that you want to mention. I'll mention for listeners. You've got stuff like I'll probably mispronounce this, but Chakra, Power Lunch, Scott Pilgrim. So lots of things that are like uh books that younger readers could connect with, and then you've also
right.
got Something Terrible, which is this amazing book that readers can connect with as well and kind of process. So, um, yeah, so
Well,
power,
thanks.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Uh, Power Lunch was really fun to work on, and it's funny because having worked in schools here and there, it's one that like every now and then, you meet kids that really like it and want there to be a third book, and
Hmm.
I wish there was, but it was about a kid who gets different powers based on different foods he eats.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was a really just simple like superhero and his best friend in elementary school kind of story that Jay Torres wrote, and it was a real honor to work with him. Uh, it's funny though, because looking back on it, when I was getting started doing gigs like that, like my comics abilities were so small,
Mm,
but you know, good enough to get a gig, not quite good enough to do a great job on it, but the book came out and there's kids who really enjoyed it. And so it's always nice to talk to people who liked those characters. There's Joey and Jerome that Jay Torres based on as an homage to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster.
hmm, hmm.
And then Project Rooftop was a website that me and Chris Arendt started. And early on, the other writers on the site were Eric Stevenson, who's now running, Image, and then
Hmm.
uh, I think he's still running Image, and then Chris Pitzer, who used to run Ad House Books, and we would just ask all of our indie artist friends to redraw superheroes.
Yeah.
And at the time, in the mid 2000s, superhero comic style had gotten really, I don't know, when you think of mainstream comics, it was very mainstream, and the idea of like indie artists being hired by Marvel or DC was really far away from reality, which was
Hmm.
actually good for me at cons because like my kind of more kid friendly style tended to look cute with superheroes,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
was not common. Like these days, you go to like Heroes Con, there's lots of artists that are have a more indie style and actually get hired by Marvel and DC, but at the time it was like a little niche that was cool. And I was saying I like the thing about superheroes putting their what they're about on their chest.
Hmm.
I also love costume design in comics and sci-fi and fantasy, like more than I think most people. Like I think everyone who knows me gets tired of me talking about the minute changes in superhero costumes from movie to movie or on Star Trek, when they redesigned the uniforms. I'm like, oh, well, this season they did this. So I know that that took place then.
Hmm. Hmm.
I love that every so often a character will change their costume. And so um, one of the things that got us started on Project Rooftop was the idea that at the time they would just let whoever was on the monthly book redesign the character, and not everybody who's good at drawing a comic is also good at designing a costume that's going to look good in a whole bunch of different styles.
Hmm.
And I don't know, we just started doing these fun things, and then we started having contests, and we started having guest judges, and all these we got to meet all these up and coming creators who would submit stuff and became friends with lots of them, and it's wild because some of our Project Rooftop artists in the mid 2000s are now like huge superstars, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Jamie McKelvey was sending us Wonder Woman redesigns in 2006 before redesigning Captain Marvel, you know, and then Miss Marvel. And Chris Anka and is now worked on Across the Spider-Verse, doing all these different spider people, and Joe Quinones, who is just incredible, you know,
Hmm,
has
hmm.
gone to being one of the top Marvel and DC guys. I mean, there's all these awesome people that came through Rooftop, and it was a real, I don't know, I think of it as like an honor. It's a really high point of things I feel like I've contributed to comics being a cooler place, was being a part of that site.
Yeah, and very cool. And Joe has, circling back around, now gone and done Batman 89.
That was
Um,
so good, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah, I was so glad to see that. And I'm waiting
And
for a second run at some point, but I guess we'll
yeah,
see.
and he did such an incredible job on the costumes for that. And
Hmm.
that when when he got that gig, I had uh, known how much he loved the '89 Batman stuff for years. So that gig was like, oh man, this is a perfect match of artist and concept. But I loved how he kind of took elements from the later animated series costumes and
Hmm.
merged them into the '89 aesthetic. Like there was
Definitely.
a cohesive, I don't know, design process for Batman and Catwoman and stuff. And I loved his Robin.
Yeah, yeah, that was awesome. That was so awesome. Um, so hopefully more of that on the way as well. But yeah, speaking of more to come, I hope to visit with you next year at Heroes Con. Any other cons, titles, anything that you'd like to share about before we wrap up?
Um, I have I always do Fluke in Athens, Georgia, which is a really wonderful mini comics show that is run by Robert Newsom and used to be run by our late friend Patrick Dean. And it's just a wonderful Southeast uh, comics creator zine show.
Nice.
And it's only like half an hour from me, so I never miss it. Um, I've been doing the Chattanooga Comic Con because it's only like a short drive as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and I did Matthews Con, which is outside Charlotte, besides Heroes. Like that Charlotte town, like the whole community in that town is very comics friendly in a way that,
Yeah,
I've done cons all over the country, but if you do one around Charlotte, there's gonna be some cool nerds there. Um,
nice.
and then projects wise, I just did a coloring book for the state of Virginia, which is weird.
That's
But
cool.
the Department of Criminal Justice Services hired me to do like this self-care for survivors and people who are in support services. And it's like a little like mindfulness coloring book about superheroes
Nice.
needing self-care too. And they've hired me to do another coloring book for them. And then I'm designing some characters for a cartoon show coming up and doing covers for Scott Fogg's Night Care. Um, I just finished a new cover for that. I also want to shout out, if you don't mind, I just got this new
By all
inker
means. Yeah.
named Diego Moreno. He's in Spain. He's so good. I've never worked with an inker before, and all of a sudden, all my stuff looks amazing. So I highly recommend inkers. That's a game changer.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. And I love the collaboration, love the continued collaboration, and always glad to talk with you and talk about what you're working on. How is the art coming that I've been distracting you from throughout this talk?
Oh, it's good. I let me see if I can make it more visible. These are all these amalgam
Awesome.
characters in the background.
Wow. I love the level of detail. That's just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's too much. It has the funny thing is a lot of times I find these days I have to draw fully detailed and then strip it all away so that it gets simple again.
Wow, nice. That's cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, and glad to have you back on anytime, and glad to share about your work.
I appreciate it, man. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, great to talk to you.